We are recording. We're recording.
Hey, Nicole, what do you have, an old-fashioned wind-up wristwatcher? Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting of the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council to order. My name is Bob Ballou, Assistant to the Director of DEM, and I serve as Chair of the Council on behalf of DEM Director Coit. We have a quorum, we're ready to begin business, and we have our agenda. We also have, for those in the audience following along, the Council has a e-packet that is posted on the Council's website and is available to anyone who wishes to follow along electronically. And then many of us have the e-packet here on our laptops, and others have memorized it, so we don't need that. So I'll call the meeting to order and begin with item 1, which is the agenda itself. And before I look to other council members, I'd like to add one modification, and that is under item 4, the Shellfish Advisory Panel meeting summary. Under recommended actions, we'll actually look to do two things tonight: approve the meeting minutes and offer recommendations to the director on the winter harvest schedules. Those were items addressed during that meeting. They're ready for the council to consider and offer recommendations on, and tonight would be the right time to do that. So I'd like to add that as a recommended action under item 4. Is there any other member of the council that has any recommended changes to the agenda? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving the agenda as modified? Seeing no objection, the agenda as modified stands approved. And we're on to item 2, which is the meeting minutes from the last meeting held on September 9th, 2019. Any recommended changes? Seeing none, any objection to approving the minutes as proposed? Seeing no objection, the minutes as proposed stand approved by consent. And we had an issue with regard to the meeting minutes from April 1, 2019. Andy D'Angelo called attention to a couple of errors that I believe have been clarified and corrected. The council already approved those meeting minutes as amended, so I think this is just an FYI that they've been amended. Andy, does it look like those changes get with your expectations? Great. So again, those meeting minutes were approved at our last meeting as amended. Pete did a nice job, I think, putting them in the right form and providing them as an FYI. So no need to take action on that. Which brings us to item 3, public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone who's here tonight that would like to address the council on any issue that's not on the agenda to do so. Would anyone like to address the council? Yes, Patrick Duckworth.
All right, now we're signing up. All right, there's actually 2 of them. I was talking to Jason about it. I was talking to Jason, not Jason, about maybe where the skate limits are. And we have a weekly limit, which works very great, you know, but we chose, when it first came out, for the 2,600, put a low number, and there's a 4,100 for the state, for a federal limit. I was just curious if maybe we could look into maybe going with a 4,100 times 7 a week, so we can get some more landings out of it. I mean, we're really not catching nowhere near, not as many skate being landed as there was traditionally in the past, because a couple people have gotten out of it. And you know, it's take a look into that.
So that's one issue, it sounds like. Jay, do you want to respond as to whether that might be something that could be addressed at an upcoming workshop?
Yeah, I'm trying. So that was skates.
Skates, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So Pete, this is on the November docket already, or no?
Skates?
Yeah.
I did not see that, no.
But we haven't noticed that yet?
No, we haven't.
So our issue is we haven't been planning on it. We have the workshop tomorrow night. We haven't noticed it yet, but we won't have anything prepared to discuss tomorrow night. So I'm kind of thinking out loud in front of you. Sorry, but I think let us think through it, and then I can report out tomorrow night whether or not we think we can fit it in, or if the timing works for like a later. We do another hearing like in February.
All right.
I'm not sure if the timing can work out for that fishing season starts in June.
It starts in April.
Oh,
April, May, June.
Okay. So.
Okay. So a couple options there, Patrick. One would be tomorrow night's workshop, and if you want to attend that and see how that goes. If not, then it would be the following.
Right, and it's the same thing about Same thing for monkfish, I was curious if we could bring that one back up again, we're gonna look at it again, and see if we get a weekly limit for monkfish.
Oh, yep, okay.
And then there's one more.
Sure, go for it.
Seeing how sharks are really beginning to come around here, I found this out the hard way. Well, not the hard way, but I thought I had something and you can't. When did Mako become, you can't keep Mako sharks as a commercial boat anymore? You can't keep Mako sharks, there's actually a lot of sharks like on that endangered species list that the state says you can, but we can't, like, we should get like some type of clarification. I think so people can identify the shark and better off, because I mean, I know this year, I mean, I catch a lot of sharks, and I bring them in, I sell them, oh, we can have this one, then like the Makos, I thought we had something, and we can't sell Makos. You know, and it's, as the warmer waters are coming up, I'm sure, they say that there's a lot more sharks, we should be able to keep them, you know?
Yeah, so I can speak directly about Mako's. It's specifically shortfin Mako.
Yeah.
Is the one that recently was put on the prohibition list because it had a really poor stock assessment, and
Okay.
that was about half a year ago that happened, and we followed up with a public process for the state as well. So it you know, that's a federal rule as well as now we've adopted it in the state as well. The rest of them, I'd have to go through. I mean, we're pretty well synced up with the feds.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, I know a sandbar dart tip, which I found that out when I brought it in, what kind of sandbar it was, and we said we could have it, but I guess you can't have it because the fish dealer said, oh, no, get that thing out of my building, you know, you don't know this type of stuff. You know, because the sharks really don't come up to it. You know what I mean? Now that a lot more people are buying them, you know, I think the state should have a little more educated. Like, you can, instead of like saying coastal sharks list, you can have a port beagle, you can have this, you can have that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so, no, it's a good point, and I agree, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I agree that it can get confusing. So as a federal fishermen and federal dealers have to actually take a class
Right.
on the identification. We made I think we might have a link to it on our website where you can actually access the online course if you're interested. It just kind of goes through the species with you. And then I guess the rest of it, I mean, so our regs are consistent with the feds. The education piece, I take your point.
Right.
We try to do some, but perhaps we can improve that.
Yeah, no, that is figured, you know, a lot of people don't bring it up, but anything that comes on the boat, we want to sell, you know?
Yep.
I know as a condition of getting a HMS permit is a charter captain.
Yeah.
You have to take a tutorial online. Very simple. It's a federal tutorial, and it's shark education, basically.
Yep, that's the one I was
Yeah,
talking
shark
about.
identification, and then there's a little quiz with 5 or 6 questions, and if you pass all this online, you get your permit issued. But I thought it was a great little tutorial, you know?
Yep.
Right, but it just says like, I mean, I've looked into it, but it says like 45 coastal sharks. And who knows what, this one doesn't fall into a coastal, so it's a pelagic, you know what I mean? Like that's, I think for the state, we should list like poor beagle, sandbar. These are the ones you can keep. Rest, throw back.
To some extent, we do that, don't we?
Yeah, I think Patrick's point is good. It's in there. It's not super straightforward. They're like in tables. So the heading of the table is coastal sharks, and then the list is there. So we'll take a look at it and see if we can do better.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes, Terry.
I'd like to put forward the elimination of the E zone between Point Rivers and Block Island. If we mirror our neighboring state, you take Massachusetts, and they have jurisdiction over all the Cape Cod Bay and all of Nantucket Sound, and from Plymouth, Mass to Providence Sound, I believe it's 18 miles. Now we have the strip that's between Point Rivers and Block Island, and it could be an enforcement action anytime anyone without a federal permit passes through there, but they don't enforce that law. And I'd like to see it just eliminated and be all of Rhode Island waters. It would also help the rebuilding of flounders, because then anyone fishing for black-eyed flounders would have to be either outside of the 3 miles to the east, or either to the south of Block Island. Because right now, that's a loophole, because you see boats there that'll be out dragging, and they can just serpentine in and out, and if they haul back in federal waters, well, they're federal fish. They drop the net on the deck, they come in and they take out. Now, if we eliminated that, it would eliminate the situation for anyone that's fishing around Block Island, coming back to Point Judith with their fish, because that is a violation. It's just not enforced. And it would also help the blackback flounder situation that's going on, because that's a big loophole. And who's to say if they start out towing here, but once they haul back in federal waters, they're magically federal fish. And I would like to see that go on. It'd be real easy to do, just take a chalk string and snap it from Secana Point to 3 miles southeast of Block Island, and from Watch Hill, Rhode Island to the southwest corner of Block Island, and anything that falls inside of that, we're in charge of it. And that's the way it should be, because look how much property that Massachusetts takes. They take all of Nantucket Sound as their waters, and they enforce it, and they take all of the Cape Cod bed.
Thank you, Terry. And it's a very challenging issue, and it's come up several times in the past
It was 2
years.
decades ago we were talking about this, and now here it is 20 years later, and it's still the same situation.
Yeah. So again, we don't want to take up too much time, because this is just a public comment.
Right.
It's an opportunity for you to raise issues. So we'll maybe park this for subsequent discussion. But I do want to note that there is a pending federal rule that would establish a transit corridor for state-only commercial vessels harvesting summer flounder, fluke, or black sea bass. I'm sorry, summer flounder, scup, or black sea bass, and be able to transit that corridor to and from Block Island. But it would state permitted only. It wouldn't address the federal issue that you raised. If you're federally permitted, you wouldn't have that opportunity. So it's a step, I think, toward addressing the issue you've raised, but I think it might actually take an act of Congress to actually acquire those federal waters and make them all part of Rhode Island. It's an interesting issue, though.
Just call out Massachusetts and ask them how they did it, because they definitely did it, and they're protecting themselves, and we need to protect ourselves.
Gotcha. Thank you for that input. And on that point, yes,
I
Patrick?
just have a question. You just said they're gonna make a transit area for summer flounder.
Scup and black sea bass.
Who came up with them fish? I mean, you monkfish, you catch skates.
State fishermen have been transiting that area for as long as they've been state fishermen.
But
That's why there's such a problem, because when someone gets a hair across their ass and they want to pick somebody out and they say, hey, you went across from there to here. Well, yeah, I was fishing state water Block Island. Oh, that doesn't add a maximum fine, Magnuson Act, I don't know what it is now. I know 2 decades ago it was 130 grand.
I got fined $380,000 for crossing there.
Yeah.
Why didn't anyone else?
Well, it sounds like it is a big issue, and it's something that we should maybe spend some time on at a subsequent meeting. We'll have it as an agenda item, and we'll be able to review the new federal rule and offer some clarification on that, assuming it would be out by then. And then we can address the other species that you've mentioned tonight and see if there's any way forward on those. So why don't we park that for now, just because that's the best way to handle this portion of the agenda. Tee up issues for subsequent, inclusion on an agenda, and then we'll look to circle back to them. So thank you for bringing that up, Terry and Patrick. Would anyone else in the public like to address the council on any other issue? Seeing no hands, we'll get back to our agenda for tonight, which is, and the next agenda item is the Shellfish Advisory Panel meeting summary. So Katie Egan, who is our new council member and new chair of the Shellfish Advisory Panel, is prepared to offer a brief summary of the meeting. The minutes are in your meeting packet, and it's pretty much broken out into 2 parts. One would be the Whelk tagging issue, and the other would be the winter harvest schedule. So why don't we take, Katie, if you don't mind, if you want to provide whatever overview you'd like on the Whelk tagging issue first, and then the winter harvest schedule, and then that'll lead right into council recommendations to the director regarding the winter harvest schedule.
Okay.
Katie?
So we met on the September 25th. We had a forum with 5 members. John Lake, for the Whelk pot tagging program, John Lake presented to the group the department's recommendations for how to make a Whelk pot tagging program. The minutes speak for themselves. If you guys want me to expand on them, we basically just went piece by piece and had a motion for each part of the program. If you want me to go ahead, but the next steps are actually to go to a hearing, correct? And from there it'll come back to the council.
Yeah, I think we have a November 12th hearing scheduled for the Whelk tagging issue, and then that would come back before the council at the December 2nd meeting of the council.
We also discussed and voted on the winter harvest schedule for Greenwich Bay, Bissell Cove, and Bristol Harbor. The default schedule was approved for all 3 areas, but adding 3 dates in December to the Greenwich Bay and Bissell Cove management areas, because Christmas and New Year's fall on a Wednesday, so it would open up the Tuesdays and Thursdays of those weeks in the month of December, and unanimously voted to approve both areas.
Thank you. Questions for Katie regarding the Shellfish Advisory Panel meeting or her summary? So this would be an appropriate time for any member of the council who would like to make a motion regarding the winter harvest schedule. And as Katie noted, it would be the recommendation coming from the SAP, which the council may opt to support, is to maintain the default harvest schedules with the caveat that for the 2 areas, Greenwich and
Bissell Cove.
and Bissell Cove, there will be 4 additional days of harvest, the Tuesday and Thursday of the week of Christmas, the day before Christmas, the day after, as well the Tuesday and Thursday of New Year's week, the following week, so the day before New Year's and the day after. And those are all considered acceptable by staff, as I understand it. So those have staff support. They were recommended by industry. I believe there was a unanimous vote in support by the SAT.
Yes. The only thing is, actually, I don't think we voted on the 2nd of January. I think it was just the 3 days in December.
Gotcha. I thought that as well, and I thought I heard you say the 2. So, okay, so it's the 3 days. It's the Tuesday, Thursday of the before and after Christmas, and the Tuesday before New Year's.
Yes.
That would be an
I'd
additional
like to
date.
make a motion to accept the SAP recommendation as outlined by Katie.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Chris Ryan. So moved and seconded to recommend the SAP's recommendations to the director for adoption for the winter harvest schedule. This is for cohogs, for those of you seeking some clarification. And we have a new protocol, which is we're going to put the motions up on the board to make it abundantly clear exactly what the council is moving, and that way it also lend itself, when we get to issues that might lend themselves to any amendments, a nice way to work through amendments. But right now, we have up on the board a motion to recommend that the director adopt the winter harvest schedules as proposed by the Shellfish Advisory Panel, moved by Dave Monty and seconded by Chris Ryan. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is the council ready for is there anyone from the audience that would like to comment on the motion? Seeing no hands, back to the council. Is the council ready for the question? If so, all in favor, raise your hand. And it's unanimous in support. Thank you. So we'll move on with our next agenda item, which is item 5, which is applications to the Shellfish Advisory Panel. These are applications seeking membership on the advisory panel. We have 2, one from Ken Murgo, who's here tonight, and Ken, right?
Yes.
Yes. And John McDonald, who is also here tonight. Thank you, both of you, for submitting your applications. This would be to the council for consideration and potential this is a council decision, so you don't have to recommend this one. This would be a motion to appoint either or both individuals to the Shellfish Advisory Panel. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the, Andy?
Motion acceptable.
Is there a second to that? Seconded by Dave Monte. So moved by Andy D'Angelo and seconded by Dave Monte to appoint both Kenneth Murgo, and John McDonald to the Shellfish Advisory Panel. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is there any objection to the motion? Seeing no objection, the motion passes by unanimous consent. Thank you very much to both of you. We really appreciate your interest and look forward to your participation on the Shellfish Advisory Panel. Which moves us along to item 6 on the agenda, which is the 2020 Sector Management Plan. I think, Jason, you might want to speak briefly to this.
Yeah, I thought it might be worthwhile just to indicate what these are. And so I won't go back too far, but when the current licensing statute was created, there were a couple of elements in there, and one of them was a requirement for the division to produce information that the council and the IAC could base their licensing judgments on. And so we created what we call the sector management plans. There were 3 of them. We've kind of collapsed them into a single document, but they still have 3 sections: finfish, crustaceans, and shellfish. And within that, we have information on stock status. We have information from the division's perspective on whether or not we can entertain more effort or not. And then in the end, after you make your determinations, which you'll do tonight, your recommendations, we put those in there as well. So we'll come back to you. So we wanted you to know that those are there. We produced them pretty early now for the IAC meeting, so that the IAC has information to make their recommendations to you with. But once we get through tonight, we'll update the document with your recommendations, and then we'll bring it back to you in December to have you sign off on those, and then we'll call them finalized and publish them to the web. We used to file these as regulations, and we stopped doing that a year or 2 ago. But we still follow all of the other aspects of it, aside from bothering the Secretary of State with some papers. So everything else is follows that protocol. It's official. We wait for you to finalize it, and then we publish it. And it sort of documents the licensing process for each year. So it's a valuable document.
That document is included in the meeting packet for tonight's meeting. Questions for Jason regarding the sector management plan for 2020? See, no, there is no action needed on this tonight. It's just because the recommended action would be in December for adoption. Okay, so seeing no questions, we'll move on to item 7, which is the September 10th public hearing items. I believe we have about 8. We'll take them one by one. For each, I'll look to the council for a motion, and what we'll do is we'll have Pete do a quick summary of each issue. I know for a fact that there were no public hearing comments, so I won't be asking Pete for a reminder as to whether there were any comments on any of the issues, because there were none. And you might remember that there was an IAC report provided at the last meeting on these items. So the package is together and before you tonight for final recommendation to the director on these items, and we'll take them one by one. And Pete, whenever you're ready, I guess we'll tee up the first one. Or John, I'm sorry, I forgot. That's right. John Lake from Marine Fisheries will be walking through this presentation. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you. So we have, these are our regs that usually pertain to licensing for this cycle. A lot of them are just clarifying regs, so we'll go through them. This is the first. It's a regulation that's purpose is to clarify the documentation requirement when it comes to commercial data reporting. Right, and you guys have heard this one before. The word that we're using, documentation, was unclear as far as how you were going to actually record, or in this case log, your data into the logbook. And basically we are clarifying the exact language that the trips, if you want to go to the next slide, I believe we have the annotated regs, that we have, we're clarifying 2 things actually. One is that language has changed to being logged, not documented. There was a lot of confusion around documented. And then also, anyone who's filled out our logbook in our instructions, we've always listed the required fields, however, they've never been in regulation. And once again, a lot of these regs are moved by us to clarify and solidify our data reporting regs. We are putting the required field in regulation. These fields have always been reported since the inception of the logbook. There are no new fields.
Great, so that's any questions for John regarding this regulatory proposal? Again, there were no comments at public hearing on this, and typically I would go to Jason to see how the division feels about each and every issue, but I know for a fact that these are all coming from the division, so the division supports all of these, and tonight it's up to the council to determine whether you as well support these and wish to recommend adoption by the director. Any questions? If not, would anyone like to make a motion? Dave? And by the way, here's what we can do.
Okay.
If Nicole, you want to put up what staff have now done is draft motions, so some sort of seamless fashion. I think we're going to see a motion pop up on the screen.
Yeah, as soon as he makes the motion and then we get a second, I'll throw it.
Oh, I see. I thought he was going to actually. Got it. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm not quite sure what these are titled. In other words, I'd like to make a motion to approve this, but what do I say?
Can you go back a slide, son?
Yeah, we'll go back.
Pete, can you go back? Yes, there we go. So these are this would be, I'm thinking, Dave, that the motion might be to recommend adoption of the clarified reporting documentation requirements as they pertain to, I'm sorry, there you go, Nicole. So this could be a much simpler way to write it, and that is the motion to recommend that the director adopt amended section 2.7.4C as proposed.
So moved.
Is there a second to that? Second, thank you. We're working our way through this attempt to make this more streamlined process with regard to motions, and I think we're getting there. So a motion has been made and seconded to recommend adoption of these proposed regulatory changes. Is there discussion on the motion? Jason?
Just one question, go back to, I think it was brought up prior, but about going to put in your logbook prior to offloading. That's fairly simple for someone that pulls their boat up to the fish house and offloads. Whereas we pull up to the dock, offload our fish, and then drive it to a truck. So, I mean, it's, or drive it to Point Judith. So, some days we're not sure if we're landing with Dan Calitri or if we're driving to town dock. So kind of tough to document that you've sold to the fish house when you don't know which one you're going to, the fish are in the back of your truck. That's a tough one.
It's a good question. Any response or comments on that?
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I guess you could get every field then but dealer sold to and fill that one in later. You know, it's tough. We really tried to accommodate you guys with the prior to offload. But yeah, that's one I hadn't thought of. So.
Yeah, it's just it's a whole different game down our way.
That makes sense. Good point. So, and I think that's something, typically enforcement's here, we want to make sure that sentiment is conveyed to enforcement. So we'll make sure that does get conveyed in that way. Good question. Additional questions or comments on the motion? From the public? Yes, Patrick Duckworth?
Well, we gotta think about how this goes in the regulation here, because if it's prior to being sold, so that means, what are we saying? Are we saying when the boat lands at dock, it has to be filled out? Because if that's the case, it's like the federal fishing logs are the same way. When you pull to that dock, you have to have it's a VTR, which everyone's familiar. If you don't have that filled out when you hit the dock, they can fine you up to $25,000 right then and there. So what are we saying here? Because they consider once you hit that bulkhead, so wherever you tie up, a dock, anything, first dock that you hit, it's being sold.
John?
Even though you bring it to your truck or whatever, you know, so I just want to make sure, because then, you know, you have a million guys in skiffs, and I understand being in a skiff, you know. No one has a computer or a piece of paper, all of a sudden, they pull up to the boat ramp, technically as soon as you hit, that's landing, which then is being sold for, and if you didn't have it filled out, then you got a violation right there. You know, so I think you might want to look into that, clarify how that is, because you just throw a word out like that is a little
I think clarification is actually the very intent of this measure. John, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So, Patrick, we did hear a lot of comments like that, and for state-only vessels, it's a little bit of a different rule. You are allowed to fill out, so you're allowed to land. You can fill out your logbook once you've tied up before you offload, so prior to offload. So it's different from the federal rule where you're right. When you land, you have to have everything filled out. For a state-only boat, you can land, take a breath, fill out your logbook, and then offload your fish. So it's a little bit different, a little bit more flexible to accommodate the small boat
So
fleet.
now, how does that go when you, I'm just throwing this out here, because I mean, we're gonna make it a rule, stuff's gonna come out. So when a guy goes to a boat ramp, puts his boat on a trailer, starts driving up the road, or he gets stopped and he doesn't know where he's selling, you know what I mean, like, how's that gonna go?
So I mean, just thinking out loud here, I'd argue when you load your boat on the trailer, that's an offload because you're coming off the water, so.
Is this something new? Because I think a lot of the state guys right now that do electronic reporting do it at home. When they get home, they do it.
So that's part of the logging. So you can, if you're a state-only boat, once again, you can log your catch as long as you're filling out the required fields there on paper, and then you can go home and enter it into the computer. That's fine. The intent here is to capture the catch, you know, right away. You know, recognizing the federal rule didn't fit with the small boat fleet, we made the accommodation that you can tie up, and as long as you have an offload, you can document everything you got on
But for
board.
this past year, if you didn't need paper logs if you had electronic logs.
That's right.
So now you need paper logs and electronic logs starting this year?
No, you could have your tablet on the boat and log it in your tablet. You could have your paper, you know, state issued logbook, log it there, or, you know, however other format you want to put it in, as long as you capture those fields. Sorry?
Could you jot it down on a piece of scrap paper that you're gonna enter when you get home or no?
As long as that's why, one of the reasons why we made the fields crystal clear. Yes, if you want to do that, if you're doing it at home, as long as you're hitting all of these, now, dealer sold to, I didn't consider that, but you can write all these things down, bring it home and do it, yeah.
Another question, so you know, if you buy something with a credit card and it says, billing address, then it says shipping address, rather than typing it in twice, you just click a little thing, like, in this day and age, I mean, we all sell to a dealer, and they give us a slip and we leave, and we look at it, everybody looks at it to make sure, hey, I had 300 bluefish, yeah, I wanna make sure I had 300 blues, I had 20 to tog, I had, 3,000 dogs, yep, I agree with the slip, I look at it, it's all right, like, in this day and age, it's gonna be something, I mean, he's reporting, can't we just like click a little box and say, oh, we agree with the dealer, and then, because right now, like, you're trying to say do it at the dock, I think I have 4,100 dogs, and the dealer weighs it as 3,800 dogs, and, I think I have 100 fluke, and I read 100, and it's, 92, it would just be real easy if there was some little thing on the computer, you could click it, you already look at your dealer slip, you click the button, you agree with his weights, which we all look at the slips every day anyway.
John?
Yeah, sure. Well, remember, part of it is the logbook and the dealer report is a two-ticket system, so they're supposed to validate each other. However, we do have a project that we have been working on where we do want to move to a system that's a little more modern, where maybe your license had a barcode or a swipe on it, that you could match that trip right up there on the spot. Right now, we're not there yet, so we still require that bit of validation. We would still want to get effort data out of you, however, gear, hauls, things like that. So,
And Chris?
I just have a question going back to the point that got brought up with that Jason started to bring up. And John, your response was, okay, on that last item, you could fill that in after you've made the sale. But my sense is given the nature of this document, that there ought to be some sort of a note or an asterisk or a parenthetical in item 10 that, says that you're allowed to fill that out once you've brought it to the dealer. I just don't want people to, we're trying to prevent ambiguity here, and I just think if you gotta have the first 9 filled out before you start taking the fish off the boat, but item 10 is something that gets filled out after you've completed the sale, there should be some way to acknowledge that in this paperwork. That's my own feeling. I mean, I bring that up for discussion.
I think it's a very good point. It could well be folded into the council's recommendation to the director that very issue be considered and promulgating the final regulation, that there be some notation made that with regard to number 10 there, that field may not lend itself to being completed prior to offloading.
You know, I think that would be at completion of sale, item 10 has to be documented.
So, how does the council feel about folding that sentiment into the motion? It seems like, I see a lot of heads nodding
Yes.
and nodding. So, as proposed, and then, so we'll call this a friendly amendment to, and consider clarifying number 10 in the list of required fields. How's that for? How does that sound? Is there any objection to amending the motion? If there's no objection, then the amended stands, then the motion stands amended, and we're continuing to discuss it. Katie?
I'm just a little concerned, like you were saying before, about, I mean, as it's written now, is either the paper catch and ever harvester logbook has to be, is where it's logged either in the paper logbook or the electronic device. Like there's no, it doesn't say anything about, you know, a notebook that you're going to write in later. So as it's written now, it's either the harvester logbook or an electronic device. I'm concerned that the guy with the skiff isn't going to have a tablet, or if they don't have the paper logbook on board.
Any thoughts on that? I mean, it's logbook is logbook. I mean, but John, you did indicate that something.
No, I'd be happy to accommodate that. My advice for folks, you can print out our logbook page right on the internet. Just keep, that's making sure you're getting all your fields right there. I'd be happy to clarify that, but I think that'd be a good way educating going forward. But yeah, we're not trying to hang people up on these. We just want to get the data as soon as possible. So.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, is the council ready for the question? So the motion as amended reads to recommend that the director adopt amended section 2.7.4C as proposed and amended to clarify number 10 in the required fields. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand, please. It's unanimous. Thank you. 5-0 in support. And we're on to the next item. John?
Okay. So the next one is also a data reporting clarification. This is to, once again, so two things going on here. We always had our due dates for the paper logbook in the instruction. In the instructions, we're moving those to regulation. And the second one is to clarify that the paper logbook has a different schedule than the electronic logbook. If you're filling out paper, if you have the logbook endorsement, you are to turn in your paperwork quarterly, April, July, October, and January. If you are, and then the next part of it is, if you are on electronic reporting, you must submit your trip reports no later than 48 hours after the end of the trip. And just to make it crystal clear, submitting and logging are different. Logging is actually putting it into the device, the electronic device. It can actually hold things before it is submitted, which is when you actually hit the submit button. It goes like an email to the database. So that is the two things here.
Thank you. Questions for John on this proposal? No comments at public hearing, and I know the division is in support. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I have a question.
Well, let's wait till we get a motion on the table, and then I will take public comment. So first we would need a motion on the table regarding, and here, Nicole might be able to draft that. That's the old one, so we need. Are you right? Do you have something written, or are you? Yep. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Motion to, so here's a potential motion that the council, anyone on the council might wish to make that reflects this issue. Would anyone like to make this motion?
I'll make the motion.
Katie, Egan moves. Is there a second? Seconded by Andy D'Angelo. So moved by Katie Egan and seconded by Andy D'Angelo to recommend that the director adopt amended sections 2.7.4E and F as proposed. And maybe we can toggle back to the actual change to, if that's easy enough to do. There you go. So we know exactly what's before us. Dave?
So there's no
time limit right now for electronic logbook reporting? Because it doesn't say an allotted time, I'm sorry. It's 48 hours, I understand, after the trip ends, that's what we were proposing. What was it before?
For electronic, I believe, yeah, that's right. So we had it in reg, which was not ideal, reporting on your electronic device prior to the start of the next trip.
Oh, okay.
So you can imagine, you know, if you take a month off, that's going to be problematic for us. So.
Further questions, discussion? Go on to the audience. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question.
John.
My problem is with the final quarter, when you have to submit your logbook, they send out the license renewals in December. And they send, you know, first of all, it's like a waste of money. They're sending everybody a notice saying that it's due, but you don't have to send it in until you're done with it in January, you know, the end of December. But you can't renew your license because you still got October, this was the paperwork, October, November, October, November, December. So usually what they do is they tell you that, you know, send in what you have, and then you're up to date, and then you still have to mess around with the month of December when you're done. Is there a way that they could make that a little, you know, more user-friendly, I guess, for the, you know, management part of it, you know, to renew your license? Because it seems to be a big deal. Everybody gets the same letter, and it causes problems.
So it's the issue of the fourth quarter reporting and how that overlaps the license renewal period.
Right, you can't, you know, they send it to you, it's not due until the end of the month, in December, you can't renew your license yet.
Right, well, you can if you have December all up to date. So guys that want to go right on, you know, right away, we do have that accommodation in there on number 5 there. You know, it's tricky. We you know, guys that are fishing like that are fishing December, so we want to get that logbook. So, you know, we do want to see it. So you can see right there, if you want to renew prior to January 15th, harvest reports must be submitted for all of December, if renewing in January, up to the due date in December. So you can get in. I can see you could get bound up at the end, you know, the very last few days. But
I totally understand how it works. I go through the same thing every year. It's just a lot of guys, you know, complain about it. How am I gonna, you know, I know they can send it in, but then you don't have another envelope to send the rest of it in. And to me, it just could be, I guess it could just make it easier, maybe put something in there that you only need to, you know, send it in, I guess, up until the end of November.
Margaret McGrath is here. What is the first day of the renewal period when you?
First week in December.
First week of December. So,
Right.
yeah, so I understand the point you're making, and I can see how you could get caught up in having to send two reports in if you do fish in December. I do. It's a point well taken. We'll go right up, starting with Terry.
Have you ever thought of changing it to mirror the federal license, where our year would end on the last day of April and then start the first day of May, and then that would eliminate the state fishermen, because through the winter months of you know, February and March, or even late into April, a lot of people aren't fishing because there really isn't anything to catch unless it's someone like myself and there happen to be herring or sardines around, and I would still be fishing, but most of the rod and reel is, you know, they're not doing anything. It's just a way of eliminating the situation that he seems to have. I've never had an issue. I've been covering up in December and they let me renew my license. But
I think it's a good point. Maybe something that we
you
could
just mirror the feds and everything starts May 1st and ends in the end of April. But that would be taken in on your license. It wouldn't be printed 1 year. It would be printed half a year and half a year, I guess, or whatever it would be.
Yeah, it would be outside the scope of this public hearing, but maybe something we could tackle during the next cycle when we
Well,
look at.
we're always saying we want to mirror the feds, but we really don't mirror them on a lot of things.
Right. Point well taken. Greg?
I don't understand what the point of F is, because on the previous slides, we said we wanted to have everything filled out before you land, and now I'm a little confused because it's saying captains enrolled in electronic logbook program should submit trip reports no later than 48 hours after the end of the trip.
I think the key is submit. John, you want to speak?
Yeah, sure, so that's the difference between logging a trip, so if you, in the tablet device, you can actually fill the whole page, the whole trip out, and it just stores it in the tablet, so it exists nowhere else but there. People can view it, it's submitted when there's a button, you hit the button to upload, basically.
And then, is that when you hit the little thing that says you agree with it, you put yes or something?
Correct,
That's
then you've
submitted,
submitted
once you do
it,
that?
yep, you're right,
Okay.
then you've submitted it.
Thanks. Good question, good clarification. Any further comments or questions from the audience? Seeing none, back to the council. Any further discussion by the council? If not, is the council ready for the
Just a
vote?
quick-
Chris,
just a quick
yes, please.
Thought on the thing was suggested, just so I'm clear, so the suggestion he made doesn't really directly deal with this motion. It would more be changing the dates of license issuance, is that right?
That's what I heard Terry suggesting, to mirror the federal license year, which would be a big sea change for Rhode Island.
We couldn't take up today.
We could not take it up today because it hasn't been noticed, and it would be a sea change for us, but it would be something that could certainly be brought up during the next cycle of the previous things. Oh, yes, Christina.
I believe the license here is actually mandated in statute, so that would require a statutory change.
There you go. So it would require statutory
It
change.
doesn't matter to me. Going back on the logs, when I used to have a federal permit and I would do my daily reporting, is I used a yellow sticky pad and I would just put the fish on that and stick it on the page. And then when I got my slip from the dealer, I would fill in the correct weights because I had gotten in trouble because they wanted me to fill it out, which was a guesstimation of what I had. And when I was writing it in, and then it didn't match up to what the dealer was, they charged me with filing false reports. So then I started using the yellow sticky pad and putting it on there, and that way there I covered myself. So that's something that could be done, and would that be acceptable if you were doing paper logs?
So we did talk a lot about this at the workshop, at the IAC, I believe. So on the logbooks, the fisherman reports, that's a hail weight or a ballpark, whatever you want to call it. We've been given guidance by enforcement that that's what it is. Now, if it's way off, I don't know. Every case is different. But as far as if you've got 100 pounds and you put 90 pounds, it's a hail weight. It's a hail weight. You don't need to, and we went over this at the workshop. You don't need to wait to fill out your logbook to put how many pounds you have. So it's your best estimate. I would, you guys know better than me, but I would think you could give a hail weight of how many pounds you have there. So that was the guidance we were given, and we did have enforcement at that meeting who did say that exact thing.
Okay, council ready for the question? If so, all in favor, please raise your hand. Is that up, Andy? Yeah, all in favor, unanimous. It's unanimous 5-0, thank you. And we're on to the third item.
Okay, so this one is an amendment to the rules of how we issue a cohog license. Right now, if you are a student, you can get a student shellfish license and upgrade that to a commercial fishing license with a cohog endorsement after 2 years if it is actively fished. So if you meet the active fishing standard, in 2 years you could upgrade to a CFL of cohog. It has been brought up that if you are a student and you are 23 years old, you cannot get those 2 years because you're going to age out of this student license. So this was actually an industry proposal to give them a little leeway to get that experience. So what we're proposing here is that if you are in the final year of eligibility, you may meet the actively fishing standard in 1 year of holding the license and be upgraded to your commercial fishing license with cohog.
And thank you, John. That would be the new language that speaks to what John just described. Questions for John? Anyone like to make a motion on this? Moved by Chris Ryan and seconded by Dave Monte to recommend adoption of Motion to recommend that the director adopt amended section 2.7.5 D1B3 as proposed. I know that's a long-winded way of saying exactly what we just, John just covered. Moved by Chris Ryan and seconded by Dave Monte. Discussion on the motion? Anyone from the audience? Anyone who happens to be a full-time student and under 23, do know that that you are eligible to obtain a commercial shellfishing license in Rhode Island, looking at and seeing folks who might just fit into that category. So I want to make sure you're aware that that's what we're addressing tonight, and it's a entry into commercial fishing in Rhode Island, available for any full-time student under the age of 23. Back to the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? I'm sorry, there's a question? Yes, sir.
So I'm a full-time student, but I'm like 27 years old. Would I have to get like an actual commercial instead of?
Yes, this is a statutory provision, so there's no discretion on this. The statute does say that you not only must be full-time, but under the age of 23. That said, anyone, such as yourself, can apply for a new commercial license during the annual application period, which begins January 1 and runs through February 28th. And you can contact our Office of Licensing to find out more about that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, sir.
Now, is it possible for out-of-state full-time students in Rhode Island?
Not with regard to COHOG licenses.
Okay.
There are other licenses available, but COHOG is a Rhode Island only. It must be Rhode Island resident. Good questions, though. Thank you. Any other questions? Back to the council. Is the council ready for the question? All in favor, raise your hand. And it's unanimous, 5-0. Thank you. And we're on to item 4. John?
Okay, so this is another clarifying reg. So this is to add language in regulation that makes it clear that residency status must be maintained to be eligible for license renewal. In our statute, we have resident licenses and non-resident licenses are completely separate from each other. So if you change your residency status, you are no longer eligible to, so say you have a resident license, you move out of state, you are not renewing a resident license anymore. You actually have to apply now for a new license. So that's always been in statute. However, we have had a lot of questions about this particular thing because it's not crystal clear. It's just laid out in statute in the 2 categories. We're hoping that this regulation would make it clear that if you leave the state or come into the state, if you had a non-resident license, it's the same thing. You cannot just renew that license. You are actually going and applying for a whole new license, just like you're back at square one. So.
Thank you. Questions for John on this issue? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to this effect that no application for a license renewal. There it is right there. John?
Motion to recommend that the director adopt amended section 2.7.5 E3A as proposed. Moved by Dave Monte. Is there a second? And seconded by Jason Jarvis. So moved by Dave Monte, seconded by Jason Jarvis. Discussion on the motion. Questions or comments from the audience? Terry?
Yes, now that out of state, someone living out of state with a Rhode Island license, does that also count for an aggregate certificate?
I don't know if it does.
For the fluke aggregate?
Yeah.
I'd have to look into that one.
Because
This is
there's
just
people that come around
concerning like the
money and
multi-purpose of
bought
the
up
PELs or CFLs. Sorry?
There's been people with money who bought up aggregate certificates that are out of state but hold a Rhode Island license.
I'd have to look into that one. That's not what we're addressing here, so.
Well, I thought you were addressing the license, it's a different, out-of-state license to a Rhode Island license. Isn't that
Right.
what we just talked about?
Yes.
Then the certificate should be with that also, because they have a fluke certificate, but they live in Connecticut, you know what I mean?
Sure, no, I do.
That was intent for Rhode Island fishermen only, and that was to help save our fluke from being landed by a lot of out-of-state boats.
Jade, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about the fluke exemption certificate,
Yeah.
Terry. And so the fluke exemption certificate isn't attached to the license, it's attached to the vessel for the reason that you just mentioned. It goes with the history of that vessel currently. So the vessel, you have to have a Rhode Island a license that allows you to land, you know, summer flounder in the state. So that's one requirement to make the exemption certificate work. But the certificate itself goes with the vessel, and it has to be a vessel that had that history in Rhode Island. So, but that's, I think, a separate issue from this.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, back to the council. Any further discussion by the council? Seeing none, is the council ready for the question? If so, all in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous, 5-0. Thank you very much. And we're on to item 5.
Okay, so this one is a department proposal to change the eligibility requirements to for the prioritization of the issuances of new licenses. Each year, as folks are aware, we do have a limited number of licenses that we issue via a lottery and prioritization and/or lottery system. So one thing we've seen, and we've seen this before, however, we had a very egregious one that kind of brought all this to a head this last season, where we see people who are essentially flipping licenses. You'll have a license, you'll have your license, you will sell, say you sell a multi-purpose license, then you'll go and you'll apply and get an entry-level commercial fishing license, and then what we were seeing is some people were getting history on that license, activity on that license via questionable sources. I can tell you the one that threw it all in our face was a guy saying he was getting a pound of squid from shore every day in February into the Newport Bridge. We consider it a very, it should be a very considerate decision if you're going to sell, especially a multi-purpose fishing license. And, people are trying to get these licenses that we are giving out, and we want to make it as level playing field as possible. We want to give it to someone who's actually going to fish the license and who has been working their way up through our prioritization system. What we came up with to prevent this from happening in the future, so if our proposal is that if you sell your license, and you can certainly go get an entry-level license, but you have to wait a minimum of 7 years before so if you sell your license, you can certainly come back in and get another license. But as far as being eligible for those licenses that we issue through priority, you'd not be eligible for the top categories, aka the activity in the same sector, activity in a different sector, or crew activity for a minimum of 7 years. Certainly, if it came down to the resident lottery, we're not kicking them out of that one. Basically, though, we just don't want to see people gaming our system to flip these licenses. So,
questions for John on this proposal? Let me get a motion first, Ken, and then I will go to you. Always good to have a motion up on the board first. Would anyone, member of the council, like to make a motion on this? Any member of the council to get this? Jason? So moved. So Jason, motion to recommend that the director adopt amended section 2.7.5 G1E as proposed. Moved by Jason Jarvis. Is there a second? Seconded by Andy D'Angelo. And after we get the motion, we can go back to the slide. I'm not sure what you have for us. Slide that. There we go. So here, this would be the new regulatory language that would be enacted if this were to go forward. And John just described the context for this. Ken?
I think your language is very specific to somebody who has to hold a license for 7 years. Does that necessarily capture people who are getting the deckhand prioritization? Because they
so it only applies if you sold. So say you sold your license.
Yeah.
So
but then you could not get a new license, work as a deckhand for 2 years, and jump right back in. Just the way this is written. Just something I thought.
Well, even as a deckhand, you're holding a lesser license usually. A lot of the guys will have a CFL. I see your point there.
I just think the way this is written very specifically, I don't think you're excluding people who you're making it so only people who are trying to get the prioritization via having a non-restricted invitation.
That's a fair point. I see that.
Because when you said it, you said that it captured all those high priorities, but the way this is written is very specific to that one priority. This is something I noticed. I support it in general.
Thank you for bringing up that point, Ken. I can see the wheels turning in John's head. Yes, Greg?
So this isn't meant to stop somebody if you sell a license and then you decide that you, on your own, you buy someone else's, that's all good. You're
No,
just
this is
saying that-
separate from business sale,
Okay,
yeah.
Additional questions from the audience? Seeing none, back to the council. Council comfortable with this? Any further questions? Council ready for the question?
Are we gonna, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
we're gonna work in gentleman's point?
Well, John, what do you think? I mean, I can, it seems to me that Ken had a very good point there. I mean, is this, so this specifically refers to cases where an applicant has previously surrendered a license to the department pursuant to the sale of a vessel and gear, acquired a new license. In that specific instance, upon the sale of a business, you've had the activity on your license, you've qualified for it to be able to sell it, to sell your business. That person gets that person who acquires the business needs to then hold that license for a minimum of 7 years before becoming eligible to essentially resell.
And so I will say this, I hadn't thought about the crew, but the cases where we see this are like, you know, someone will sell a multi-purpose, get a CFL with non-restricted fin fish, questionable activity occurs, and next thing you know, they're first in line for the PEL restricted fin fish, which is the one that everyone is applying for. You know, it's a, if you're a crew member, you're actually getting those landings legitimately because you're on a boat that's actually fishing. So, you know, I'd have to think about it. I mean, unless you're in cahoots with the captain and there's something going on there, you know, I'm assuming the best of people here, but I don't know, we can beat it around, you know, as far as, you know, putting in some other, we can put the caveat in for that prioritization category as well. But we haven't seen a problem with, we've seen different issues with crew activity, not issues like this, let's just put it that way.
I'm fine with that, I just kind of noticed there was a little.
No, it's a fair point.
So, thank you. Hang on a second. Hang on, Patrick. So I just want to make sure the council is clear that, you know, what I heard John just saying is that, in respond to Ken's point, is this is limited to just this particular type of license transaction, or business transaction that involves acquiring a new license. There are other instances that are not covered by this, but to John's point, that hasn't become an issue. So this is the one that has become an issue, which is why it's being addressed specifically. Yes, Patrick?
Is it illegal to give my crew catch?
So a crew member could be on your boat though, and say, I'm a crew member on your boat.
Yeah.
Will you sign this affidavit saying that I fished, you know, and then you can say, okay, I fished, you know, 40 days with you last year. And so you have to sign an official affidavit, and we go in, and then we go and look at the history of your boat, and that is one of our categories for crew.
So that's a landing?
No, it just gives you a priority status.
It's
for the
just
new
for
license.
priority, so especially for the finfish licenses, we have the categories, we break them into three tiers, and we actually look at who has the most days, and you know, we go through all the applications, and yeah, that is one of them. So if you're a crew member and you're on a boat, and you're fishing on a boat, you can ask that captain to sign that affidavit for your activity, to be in line for that license, yeah.
Oh, so it's not like landing, it's not, you're getting me all mixed up.
No, it's just someone working on your boat. They're not getting the history. They're only getting, you know, verification that they are participating in the fishery, really.
Oh, so all my
So they get a better
deckhands-
place in line.
So all my deckhands, I should get them in line for this, because
You know, if they are interested in getting in for the license, they can certainly avail themselves of it, yeah. That's true, yeah, so we do have, that's a very good point. It's not just the affidavit, we do have specific rules for each category. I'd be happy to go through them with you at a later date, but yeah, we do require one thing that is required is a 1099 form. So they have to, not only do they have to show, because like I said, we have had issues with some of this stuff too. It is a line, people try to cut it. So yeah, you have to have the activity on the boat, the captain has to sign off, and the person that is applying has to show proof via 1099 that they, derived income from that, so.
Okay.
Dave, are you comfortable with, you would ask whether?
Yes.
this motion- Okay, so any other comments or questions from the council? If not, is the council ready for the question? If so, all in favor, raise your hand. And it's 3 in favor.
I'm gonna abstain.
You're gonna, 4 in favor and 1 abstention. All right, so the motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention, Chris Ryan being the 1 abstention. And we're on to item 6, thank you.
So this is a division proposal for reporting requirements. This is to require that the dealers have all their reports in prior to license renewal. Right now, believe it or not, if you're a dealer, we can't prevent you from renewing your license if you don't have all your reports in. We are moving to change that just to give us another tool in our toolbox to get all of our data reports in.
So there would be the language, basically dealers need to basically abide by the same requirements as harvesters as far as reporting prior to license renewal. Questions for John? Would anyone like to make a motion? Dave?
So moved.
Motion to recommend that the director adopt amended section 2.7.9A7 as proposed, moved by Dave Monte, seconded by Chris Ryan. Discussion on the motion? Anyone from the audience or public have a comment or question, or comment I should say? Patrick?
Maybe just for a future reference, when we do reporting, maybe we should make it more like the feds. There's actually a trip report number, because I had a problem one time. I went fishing 2 days in a row, which I do all the time, and I sold to one dealer and I sold to another dealer. Well, one of the dealers, by the time the bookkeeper got to it, whoever entered in the data, they entered in the wrong number. So then it looked like I double reported on a couple trips, a fluke, and they thought they had the crime of the century. It ended up being a very simple missed paperwork thing, so maybe I was just thinking maybe on the trip report, so that way when the deal was, when I enter in, because now since we got to handle these, all the dealers, you have to report before you sell to the dealer, we're saying, very simple little number, 627. Now the dealer report 627. Now it's a very crystal clear, day by day what happened there, trip by trip. That's just a little. It would have saved a lot of grief. I mean, if the taxpayers they probably got about 30 hours of overtime looking into this investigation that ended up being a little. Nothing,
Gotcha, thanks for that. Additional input from the public on this motion, seeing no hands back to the council. Any further discussion by the council? Not ready for the question. If so, all in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous 5-0, thanks. And there were 2 more up here.
Okay, so this is back to data reporting. This is similar to the first one that you saw. We are clarifying our reporting requirements for the party charter sector. Once again, updating that trips must be logged prior to the termination of the trip, since it's a little different. There's not a true maybe not an offload on every trip. And once again, submitted electronically within 48 hours at the end of the trip. Little difference here is that the party charter is all electronic. There's no paper option. And once again, we also clarified all of our required fields.
There's the actual language that would be adopted if this were to move forward. Questions for John?
So, I have a question, I just want to make sure I understand this. So, logged prior to the termination of the trip, does that mean when you hit the dock?
So, that is a good one. So, the termination of the trip would be, I would think, once all your passengers have offloaded and you're leaving the vessel for the evening or the day. That was our.
So you need the.
So when you're done with your trip, you tie it up, you lock it up.
So you need
you
the
walk off the
electronic,
dock.
you have to, have the electronic.
It should be in the tablet
In
at
the
least,
tablet.
or your phone. Yeah. So.
And then the submittal, when does the submittal take place, John?
Within 48 hours.
Okay.
So, recognizing not everyone has Wi-Fi or data on the tablets, you can go home and hit the upload button.
There it is, I'm sorry, I was looking right at it. So logged prior to the termination of the trip and submitted within 48 hours. Any further?
There's no requirement now, correct?
Well, we do have an electronic reporting requirement, and we do have it within the 48 hours. We did not clarify all of the required fields.
Okay.
It wasn't as clear as far as documenting and logging. That was, something we beat around a little bit, and we settled on logging as the actual word.
So the language you see up top replaces the existing language down the bottom there, which would be struck in. Andy?
Make a motion, we want to adopt it.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Chris Ryan, moved by Andy D'Angelo and seconded by Chris Ryan to recommend that the director adopt amended section 2.9.2F as proposed. Discussion on the motion? Anyone from the public have any comment on the motion before the council? Seeing none, back to the council. Any further discussion? Not, is the council ready for the question? If so, all in favor, raise your hand, please. 5-0 unanimous. And we have one more? One more.
So this is my last one, and this is complementary to the last one and similar to the one that you've seen for dealer and for the commercial logbook. Basically, we are saying that we are not going to renew the license until the logs have been put in. So the party charter, for party charter licenses, you cannot renew until you have put in your reports.
Thank you. Any questions for John? And do we have a slide that has the actual language?
I do have a question. How do you know that all the trips are in? The captain, it's different than commercial.
It is, and it's something that we've been thinking about a lot at the department. And, as you recall, we are asking for at least one negative report a year to capture that, because on the state level, I think you have a lot more folks that might have that, especially in Rhode Island, where we have a very inexpensive 2-year license. If you have your OUPV license, why not pay $25 and get the 2-year party charter and cover yourself if you have friends or whatever on the boat. It's a tricky one, we have ways we could look into it. Certainly I will say, you guys like to advertise, and we can look at your calendar on your website. I don't know, it's something new, and we hope in the future. Right now, we're mirroring the federal rule, so the feds are moving forward on this in even more technological advances. I'm sorry for the butchering of the word. Things like electronic monitoring, geo-tracking, some of these VMS devices. That might be other ways in the future to verify trips have taken place. We're not right there right now, but we do. We've heard it from our party charter industry that we want to mirror the federal rule. We want to have all the state and federal party charter captains on the same reporting systems. So that's where we are now. But you're right. We beat this around a lot.
With the BTRs, we used to do the paper ones.
Mm-hmm.
I've done electronically for years now. You had to submit did not fish reports.
Right.
So that was one way that you would certainly.
And so we discussed it at a meeting a year ago, I think, about how we don't want to bind up the federal guys with some negative report, monthly negative report. That's just another requirement on top of that one. But it gives us a little more peace of mind for maybe that one annual one, just because we do feel like we have a latency issue with the state-only captains. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Would anyone like to make a motion? Andy?
Make a motion, we adopt it.
All right, moved by Andy D'Angelo and seconded by Dave Monti to recommend that the director adopt amended section 2.9.2F5 as proposed. Any comments on the motion from the audience? Seeing none, back to the council. Any further discussion by the council? If not, you ready for the question? If so, all in favor, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous 5-0. Thanks. So that was a not so brief march through 8 items, but these are items that have had a long travel to the IAC, to public hearing, finally to the council, and then I think tomorrow to the director for final review and consideration. So these recommendations will all be provided to the director tomorrow for her review and consideration, and pending her approval, filing with the Secretary of State. That completes this agenda item, and I think the last, or almost last item is division proposal to amend Whelk minimum size process for moving forward. Jason?
Yeah, we just wanted to give a quick update. The main reason is, so we had 2 Whelk items that came forward at a previous hearing. There were some concerns with them. We have the tagging element of the 2 things. That's going to be a part of the next public hearing. But the Whelk minimum size is still an element that we are struggling with. We're working on it. We even have some internal conflict in the division as well, as far as how we want to kind of bring this back forward. So we just wanted to let you know, we knew you'd see the tagging stuff moving forward, and we didn't want you to wonder what was going on with the minimum size stuff. It's still something we're working on. It's a challenging animal to measure. So we are trying to, take the public comment that we've received and the discussions that we've been having internally at the division, and then we'll come back forward. It'll go through a full public process and all of that, but we'll probably bring it forward we usually do a hearing like in February or late February, early March, so it'll come back forward at that time, and it'll have a workshop and everything involved with that.
Thanks, Jason. Any questions regarding the Whelk minimum size issue? Yes, Ken?
Is there any possibility of the Shellfish Advisory Board being involved in the back and forth before, I don't know, just to vet the options, I guess?
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of industry members there, so I think that could be a resource.
Yeah, no, it's a good comment, Ken, and certainly the Shellfish Advisory Panel would get a chance to weigh in on it. What we have to think about is timing that out so that we can get the Shellfish Advisory Panel to weigh in on it before we go to notice. So we will do that. It's a good idea.
Point. So we'll try and schedule that or sequence it in just that way. Excellent suggestion. Anything else on this item? This concludes the meeting. I think it's good to just kind of quickly note that what's coming up is a workshop tomorrow night. Time and place?
Hazard, 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock across the street at the Hazard Room on a set of issues, mostly commercial regulations, as I understand them.
Yep.
You want to just summarize what those are, Jay?
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Hold on,
I think it's, flute, scufflax, sea bass, all of the commercial fisheries that start January 1. We're going to do the Whelk tags. What's that? Menhaden bluefish as well. Multi-state possession limits. Am I missing anything? High grading.
Aggregate pilot.
Aggregate pilot. It's all everything you care about. It's going to be tomorrow.
Sorry
night,
to put you on the spot, but it was to let everyone know that it's a big chunky workshop tomorrow night on a whole slew of issues. Then there will be a public hearing on those issues on November 12th, and then this council will reconvene on Monday, December 2nd for final consideration of those issues. It'll all begin tomorrow night and then sort of wind up here on December 2nd. So that's our next phase. We look forward to that. Any further business coming before the council? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thanks so much. Appreciate everyone coming out tonight.